In the whipping, I'm whipping the soul out it. Chin the tone when I'm flexing like Pilates. Why you frontin', you act like you somebody. Keep a trail in the ville, how I go by it. I was stuck in the rut, I was nobody. I've been looking for something to go body. There's an art to the hustle like yo got it. Kid got a kick back and hit like a new shotty. In the whipping, I'm whipping the soul out it. Chin the tone when I'm...
Yo, real quick, before we start the video, I would just like to say I have a Discord. You guys should probably join. Why? Number one, there's like a bunch of ideas I haven't shown you guys yet that are like shown within like the thumbnails chant on my server. You guys can probably end up sharing your thumbnails, your art designs as well. Like, I get some interesting ideas from time to time. It's pretty lonely in the server right now. Though. Like, it's pretty much just a couple of people right now, which is why I would like some more people to join in order to share their ideas, feel more comfortable, build a more comfortable community and all of that. Not only that, but it's just going to be interesting. You guys can probably talk to me more one-on-one as well over there. So yeah, that's pretty much all I need to say right now. Yo, what's going on, Titan Clan? It's your boy King Titan X here, back with another video, and you guys already know the deal. We're going to be doing the next part to the Frieza what if, but this part is going to be very special because of the fact that this is going to actually be the end of this series. And on top of that, we have another series coming out soon. That's already fully scripted, well, the first part anyways. I hope that you guys do like it, but let's just get on with the video for right now. This wasn't going to end well. Not well for the Chaos Brigade members, that was. This particular group was made mostly out of Sacred Gear users. Honestly, quite interesting in Issei's eyes. He wasn't used to seeing so many Sacred Gear users in one area at the same time. But it didn't make much of a difference. Only made the fighting a bit trickier to handle considering the unique ability some of them had. One appeared to have control over shadows. They could vanish within seemingly an instant, but it didn't matter in the long run. Neither did this fight seemingly, since it seemed they were only using Rias's peerage as some sort of experiment to become stronger. Considering the amount that were knocked out, Issei wondered if it was meant to see just how far they needed to reach in order to compete with someone of his level. Hopefully they got their answer now. Issei went out with Akino on a date that resulted in Rias and the rest of the peerage essentially stalking them. They tried wearing disguises, but they were pretty horrible in all honesty. Issei and Akino ended up finding a way to escape the rest of the group though, but by doing this they found themselves in a strange part of town. Akino ended up leading Issei into one of the buildings, booking a room for themselves. While in the midst of this, Akino was brought into a bit of a sour mood considering she ended up meeting up with her father once again. He was with the Norse deity Odin and the Valkyrie Rosweiss. I believe that's how you pronounce her name. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but well. But Rakiel was the name of Akino's father, and it turned out he was also a leader of the fallen angels as well. Excuse me for my pronunciations, by the way. Akino ended up informing Issei of her situation later on, but she didn't want to focus on it too much. They just spent time in the room they booked, watching a bunch of reality TV afterwards in hopes of cheering up Akino's mood. They also ordered some food as well. Sure, the bill was high, but they had a credit card connected to the Gramarye bank account. Pretty much unlimited, so they were covered. When they made their way back to Issei's place, Issei was surprised to see Odin there. Sure, he found it to be a coincidence first time around, but now he was literally in his house. What was he doing here? I mean, honestly, what was this guy doing here? Come on now. Odin, sensing Issei's irritation, tried to calm the younger male down. He was only here to make an alliance with the Japanese deities, and he was just crashing at Issei's place for a little bit of time. He wouldn't stay long, and he would make sure that Issei wouldn't even know he was here. Issei was annoyed, but he at least understood where the old man was coming from. It wasn't like he could do much to Odin anyway. He had a feeling that Odin was stronger than he appeared, and if he were to attack the old man, it wouldn't go well for him. For all he knew, it would actually end up pretty bad for him, since it could start up a whole conflict between the mythologies they were associated with. Issei wasn't an idiot most of the time. He just waved Odin off and threw him a pillow. He was going to go to his room. Akino's father was here as well, though. Issei just didn't care to even address the man. Knowing his whole situation with Akino, he knew the man was a fallen angel and how he pretty much disappeared when Akino needed him the most. But Issei didn't know why, though. There was something off about everything Akino told him regarding their father, which was why he didn't look at the man with complete disdain. He wanted to hear his side of the story one of these days and fit together all of the pieces. Luckily enough, during the night, Issei struggled falling asleep. He left his room to get a glass of water, but once he opened up the door, he could hear some yelling happening. The voices sounded like that of Akino and Barakiel. What could they possibly be arguing about? Issei decided to do a little bit of an eavesdrop, and apparently Barakiel believed that Issei had some sort of cursed power within him, which was the reason for why his forms were so weird for a Red Dragon Emperor. Akino had venom in her voice. She couldn't believe that her father would honestly believe such a thing, or even have the right to say anything to her regarding who she decided to be with. Issei stumbled when he heard Akino mention how she wanted nothing to do with her father. It was something so harsh that he couldn't even keep himself still anymore. The two that he was listening in on turned over to his direction, and Barakiel was about to try and punish Issei for eavesdropping, but Akino got in the way. She wasn't about to let that happen. She called her father off. Akino ended up leading Issei back to his room, and this time around, she made sure that he slept. She practically acted like his mother in this sense. The next day arrived, and Issei ended up doing some sort of performance in the underworld. It was based off of his TV show there, and he ended up signing a good couple of autographs as well. After that was over, they would go to meet with Azazel, who was pretty much just showing some of Issei's merch, which resulted in Issei wondering how much royalties he was getting from all of this. Azazel avoided the question though and simply disappeared. Issei could practically feel Frieza clutch his fists in frustration internally at not getting money off of this. Issei decided not to let it get to him though. He had better things to focus on, such as taking Odin sightseeing. He and the rest of the Occult Research Club ended up taking the old god to different areas of Japan, leaving him in awe. Sure, on one of their travels, they ended up getting attacked by Loki, but it wasn't necessarily that Issei could not handle the man. It was only when Fenrir joined the fray did he begin to become a little overwhelmed. It took a couple of boosts for him while in his golden form to actually fight them. There was an issue with this form though. It burned through his stamina like a heavy truck burned through gas. Kiba and Jasper did their best to help Issei fight off the son of Loki, but they weren't all that strong to really do such a thing. Fenrir leaped at Issei, trying to dig their claws into him, but Issei forced himself to get up. He sent an energy ball at Fenrir and managed to save himself from getting harmed by the giant wolf. He was out of breath though. Within the armor, he was sweating bullets. He had never stayed in the form for so long while adding boosts on top of it. Loki wanted to kill Odin and create what was known as Ragnarok, but everyone was doing their best in order to prevent such a thing from happening. Valley ended up arriving as well and began to divide the strength of the creature. Valley made it quite clear that he wasn't necessarily here to help Issei after all that had happened between the groups. On top of the fact they were rivals, but that didn't necessarily mean he wanted Ragnarok to happen. Valley being here gave that little extra push in order to force Loki to flee for now. He promised that he would be back one day though. Issei shot a beam through both of Loki's kneecaps, causing him to scream in pain. He didn't end there though. With the last of his energy, he shot a death beam through Loki's height. The deity then dropped down to the ground after that. Odin was shocked to see this, but Valley didn't really care. Valley had no further business here, so he made his leave. He had more important business to take care of, which, well, with that being to retrieve Kuriko. Or is it Kurika? She was a valuable member of his squad after all. They needed to recruit more manpower before even attempting that. He was tempted to take the wolf too, but the wolf seemed to have already chosen a master here. It wasn't worth taking Fenrir right now. He'd get something better in the future. Fenrir walked over to Issei and the peerage, attempted to defend their friend. Asya began to heal Issei as well, but Odin laughed seeing them overreacting to Fenrir. Issei got up when he was fully healed and looked up at the animal curiously. What were they doing now? Why wasn't he attacking the rest of the group? Issei raised one of his hands and Fenrir had it rest on top of his head. Issei chuckled at the realization. It seemed that Fenrir decided to choose Issei as his new master. Well, wasn't that great? He had a familiar now. A strong one at that. It was fitting for a powerful emperor to have a powerful familiar. He could probably ask Sir Zex or someone to help him make accommodations for the animal. Maybe more space in the backyard or something. He honestly didn't really know. They left and went back home after that. The alliance between the Norse and Japanese gods went successfully here. There were no issues whatsoever. Issei and Akeno had a heart-to-heart about her relationship with their father. He brought Barakiel into the room as well, and they had a bit of counseling until they could finally make amends with each other. He needed to have Akeno in the right mind in order to perform well when they had to fight after all. She was pretty much the strongest in Rias' peerage after him and Rias respectively. Rosweiss was also found to have been left by Odin. She was understandably deeply upset about this. They tried to cheer her up, and Rias even managed to find some use for the Valkyrie. She made her piped up her peerage, becoming her second rook. Rias's peerage was pretty much complete at this point, although it started off as misfortune on Rosweiss's part. She at least was now with a group who appreciated her. Rosweiss also became one of the teachers at Issei school. Many of the guys immediately began to simp over her, considering how, well, she was pretty. Issei was just left in surprise seeing her at his school. When Rosweiss waved to Issei and called out his name, the kids looked over to Issei in shock, especially his closest companions, who began to butt heads with Issei, wondering why and where he knew the teacher from. Issei emitted an aura of annoyance, though forcing the two to back off. As time went by, Rosweiss found herself being one of the chaperones for everyone's trip to Kyoto. While on the train ride to Kyoto, Issei ended up looking into the depths of his boosted gear. There he ended up meeting up with the previous wielders of the boosted gear, who were all covered in these grey robes. He wondered why they all looked so hollow, though. There was a lively person in the form of a blonde woman, though, who gave him a box. She claimed it held his complete potential. Issei was confused as to what she meant by that, not necessarily believing that he could possibly get much stronger than he was now. When Issei said this, though, she pretty much just laughed at him. She explained that he had so much more untapped potential. He would probably end up being the strongest Red Dragon Emperor in history if he were to ever tap into his true potential. He was only scratching the surface so far. A white and purple colored lizard-like alien walked into the room as well, agreeing with a woman. She was surprised to see this new character, but she knew who they were. Lord Frieza. That's right, people. Tapping into their memories, she could tell that this guy was strong. Beyond strong, actually, and if Issei were to really train consistently anyway, she didn't want to think about what he would be capable of in the end. When Issei woke up, he saw that Zenobia was sitting next to him, wondering if he was okay. He dismissed her worries, so whispering into her ear about how he was simply trying to learn more about his sacred gear by looking into the inner works of it. She nodded in understanding before asking Issei if he had a sword she could use. She didn't feel right without one on standby at all times, since the church basically took her own until she returned. Issei explained that he would give her one later. Now was a bad time. She could be patient. When they finally made their way to Kyoto, Issei ended up going sightseeing himself. While doing this though, he found himself in trouble with some of the yokai there, who believed that he was the one to have kidnapped their leader, Yasaka. He was forced to fight them off, but they did manage to clear up the misunderstanding later on. It begged the question though, who actually kidnapped her? Their question would soon be answered, but in the meantime, Issei and Zenobia ended up having some time to themselves. A couple of things happened, and all that really needed to be said though was that those nights basically all I really needed to be said about those nights was that they played Monopoly a lot of the time. Nothing more, nothing less. I can already see the comments now. People already know I'm capping, but that's all I'm going to say, okay? Issei and the rest of his group ended up being confronted by the hero faction, which was led by... How do you pronounce this guy's name? Kale? They were apparently the ones to have kidnapped Yasaka, and they were unable to rescue the leader of the yokai during their first fight, thanks to the interruption from people coming from Valley's team. The next time they met with each other, though, Issei made sure this was their last match. With Issei's strength, they were able to plow through many of the hero faction members. Just like last time, though, they were tricksters. He and the rest of his group could have knocked out a lot more of these guys if it weren't for the special abilities of their sacred gears. Right about now, he was tempted to just go into his golden state and wipe all of them off from the face of the planet, but that would take too much energy. He planned on saving it for their leader. He seemed worthy enough of his golden form. After overwhelming the rest of the hero faction, Issei focused all of his attention onto Ko. He was supposedly the strongest human. They chuckled, believing he still had an advantage over Issei. When Issei transformed into his golden form, his stance began to falter a little bit. He stood strong though and got into his fighting stance. Ko dodged a couple of Issei's attacks and made sure to get some distance along the way. He was surprised to see how fast Issei was, but he wasn't going to surrender just because of that. He had a couple of moves to use against the Red Dragon Emperor after all. One of these moves was known as the Pearl Treasure. As soon as Issei sent an energy beam attack at Ko in order to just obliterate him on the spot, Ko used the move in order to send Issei's attack up into the sky. A bird's cry could be heard as their ashes fell to the ground. Ko whistled in response. He couldn't afford to get hit by that attack even once or he would be done for. Ko summoned some soldiers in order to wear Issei down, but he ripped through them like butter. Ko was beginning to lose his cool throughout the battle. He was beginning to become more stressed as Issei continued to keep moving despite all the soldiers he sent at the board. He knew that he could not let Issei touch him at all, but he was getting too close for comfort. He was supposed to have the edge here. He had the weapon that killed a biblical god after all. What made this guy so special? Sure, he had a boosted gear, but it wasn't like he had Opus as his sacred gear or something. Not like it could even happen in the first place, but it made no sense for him to be so strong. Kale slipped up at one point. He had summoned as many soldiers as he possibly could, believing that they could hold Issei down for a decent amount of time, but he was wrong. He burst through all of them and sucker punched Ko. He could practically feel his jaw dislodge. He wasn't ready for this fight. Not in the slightest. He used Horse Treasure in order to teleport himself away before he ended up dying here. They were able to reunite Yasaka with her daughter and the rest of her legion. Issei was rewarded for his efforts greatly. What sort of reward you guys are wondering, you guys can figure that out later. After the trip to Kyoto was over, everyone was informed by Azazel that Ravel Phoenix would apparently be transferring to Koa Academy. Issei had no issues with this. Azazel also informed everyone of the fact Kuroka managed to escape. They were shocked to hear this, but Azazel didn't show too much concern. He explained that Valley's group managed to break in, sure, but they had greatest strength here. This was only a minor inconvenience in the long run, and Kuroka also mentioned wanting to meet Issei again a good couple of times while in prison. He suggested that Issei keep his guard up even if he felt Issei would win against Kuroka in a fist fight. There was a chance Kuroka could learn more abilities during her time back with the Chaos Brigade that could serve to be detrimental to Issei. Issei didn't necessarily believe this part, but figured that Azazel knew best. After another one of the campaigns, Rias' mother ended up greeting the group and complimenting them on their hard work so far. She looked over to Rias and asked her about her progression with Issei in terms of their relationship. Vanillana whispered to Rias, causing her to light up like a Christmas tree. This was her mother after all. Who was she to encourage this sort of stuff? Vanillana giggled, though, explaining that she and her father had sex pretty early on, and with the way that Issei was going now, it wouldn't be too long until he became a king. Not only that, but also someone who could probably take over the Lucifer title whenever Sirzex was ready to step down. Needless to say, the mother had a strong influence over Rias, which was why they ended up cooking together. Yeah. That's what happened. She wasn't feeling too well the next day though. Maybe bad recipe or something? This didn't matter in the long run though. Well, it did, but they had more important matters to deal with. Issei would ask Rias about her condition later on. They had a rating game to win after all. They found themselves fighting Rias' cousin, Bale. Most of the matches were pretty similar to before, except for Issei's match against the man. Bale knew how strong Issei was, and he wanted to give the boy a good match. He made sure to train even harder than he ever had before. He wanted to win this match. He had made it so far, and he wasn't interested in losing here. Sure, if he lost, he didn't mind it. He didn't mind working his way back up. He wasn't a sore loser or anything, but he would prefer to win here. Issei was beginning to wear him down as the match went on, but Bale had another trick up his sleeve. Issei was using his sacred gear all throughout the match, but the both of them were holding back. He knew about that golden form of Issei's after all. Hey, Issei, why don't we stop holding back here? Let's give it our all here. The best man wins, Bale suggested. Issei agreed and went into his golden form. Bale had his own golden form as well, but that wasn't all. He forced himself to go even further. His emotions went over the edge here. He and his pawn found themselves going into their Juggernaut Drive form. His armor changed from just pure gold to gold and purple. Copying me, eh? Issei murmured. He was also enveloped in an immensely dense purple tokai. However you pronounce that word. Bale began to start chanting some sort of speech which only caused his strength to rise the more lyrics he spoke. Launched on top of my fist is a glorious imperial authority, Bale roared. He and his pawn yelled out the words dance, bloom, and finally break down the beast, climb over. They overwhelmed Issei now. No matter how much Issei tried, he was getting filled up with several punches to different areas of his body. He was actually losing? He tried his best in order to keep up by using the boosted gear, but he was unable to gain as much strength as Bale had here. He couldn't get much energy from his predecessor either, due to the fact Issei's body wouldn't be able to handle it. Frieza had his back turned to Issei and made sure his eyes were covered as well. He couldn't watch. This was practically a rehash of what happened to him against that monkey Son Goku all those many years ago. Oh, Issei was going to need some serious training. He was going to need some seriously heavy training after this. Not just 4 months either. 5 months of grueling training if he wanted to come back here and show this kitten who was boss. The match was called in Bale's favor and Issei was knocked unconscious. This was the first time they had ever really seen Issei be defeated so brutally, but at least it was against Riesa's cousin. They could take a loss from time to time. It served as a sort of humbling, but when Issei woke up, he found himself still having phantom pains of the experience, despite Asia healing him while he was knocked out. Rias cheered Issei up and explained that he just needed to get stronger next time. Issei could hear Frieza screaming in his head about how the crimson-haired girl was absolutely right. Maybe this training could add an inch or two to his biceps, get him a more imposing physique. Rias then dropped the biggest bombshell of all. He would need to be as strong as possible if he wanted to protect his family. Issei was confused at first until Rias guided his hand over to her stomach area. "We're pregnant, my king." And that's how the story ends of what if Issei was Frieza's reincarnation. I would like to thank Neptune for helping me with this series and other series as well throughout this time on YouTube. I'm glad to have basically been able to make this series, and I'm just going to be doing the seasons because that when it comes on to the whole issue with the light novels, those go way further on and it gets intense. That's all I'm going to say. I'm pretty sure most of you guys haven't read the light novels either, so yeah. This is Kuntai Next, signing out. Remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Peace, y'all.